Hey, Simon.
Hello. Gosh, my whole thing just froze up, and now I am telling the world and choreographing the joys of the technical difficulties. But hello, Jim. It's been a minute. How are you?
It has been a minute. I've been doing well. And yourself?
I've been doing well, with the exception of a turkey that was not delivered today. So I'm running into a time crunch associated with the defrost cycle, which is I guess it's a modern measurement challenge that I'm facing. Is how do you accelerate the defrosting of a turkey in the next 3 days? So exciting times though.
I think if you just dump it in some boiling oil,
Yeah.
it'll probably
Okay.
be fine.
I might do that. I was just thinking about I'll just leave it on the counter for 3 days and just hope for the best.
Sure.
But we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I'm doing well. In fact, oh gosh, well, I won't ruin the surprise. But there was a fun little thing that happened this week that I was excited about. That I don't know. I not that I've released music in the past, and I didn't actually release anything, but I featured on something that was really cool, and so
Uh, Interesting.
it's back in vogue.
I wonder what that could have been.
Who knows?
So, today, do you ever get that weird feeling that like you're on a website and you feel like somebody's watching you or maybe recording what you're doing? Like
All the time.
I always feel like somebody's watching me. That song goes through my head when I'm on websites. But anyway,
Yeah. Well,
it's
wasn't that the DuckDuckGo commercial years ago? Or it was like every breath you take.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, the
it was
creepiest song
Sting.
ever.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Very creepy. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm so surprised that song has mainstream acclaim, given that it's essentially is about stalking.
it is.
But he's
Hardcore
like, but
stalking.
he's in love. Yeah, yeah, but he is stalking.
So
So anyway, digital stalking. Is that what we're talking about
digital
today?
digital stalking, maybe
Is that
we could find a more less offensive term for it. But there's a lot of tools out there that help us do this, and I feel they don't get as much talk as the GA4s and the web analytics tools out there.
yeah.
So we're hoping to dive into that today and talk about something called behavioral analytics, which is what a lot of these tools let you do. So we have a guest on today, and our guest, I'm going to introduce him in just a bit, but usually he's on the other side of the introductions. Usually he's the one introducing other people, and he usually does it in a very creative way,
Mm.
usually with songs, with parodies. And so I thought it's only suiting to introduce him in an equally creative way. We haven't done
Oh.
this before on the pod, but we're going to give this a shot today. And let's see if this works. This was supposed to happen flawlessly last week at the Columbus Data and Analytics Wednesday. Hopefully there will be no technical glitches today. So here goes. Here's our guest.
We're gonna wait for Josh Silverbauer coming up on the stage right now. Oh yeah, it's Josh Silverbauer. He's like no one else around. He's gonna track all your clicking and scrolling. Even when he's rocking and rolling, it's Josh Silverbauer. Yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is. One more thing I just want to say right here. He's gonna make some parody songs just right for his digital nerds. User Journey by Josh Silverbauer, a masterpiece of music and words. He's a master of CRO. Sure loves Peewig Pro. Josh Silverbauer. Oh yeah, Josh Silverbauer.
Okay. That's so funny that you guys couldn't hear that. I was rocking out over here.
The amount of times that I've had to nod my head with music that gets overdubbed later. I'm a really good head nodder to make you feel like you're in the room with me listening. So
Yes.
All right. Okay. So should we react in 3, 2, 1? Should we? Is it?
Oh, you can react now. I'm not going to cut this. That's too much work.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm reacting.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, that's
That
amazing.
was that honestly, lyrical genius, number one. Number two, did I detect like a McCartney-esque vibe there? Very Beatles influenced. Wow.
Mhm.
That's amazing.
When you learn later that it's a parody song that has nothing to do with anything that you just said,
Yeah.
you're gonna
Yeah.
feel funny.
Yeah.
It was a death metal song actually.
It was a parody of the Midnight Hour by, I should know the artist name, but I forget. I'll cut that part out.
Is that the one like in the midnight hour?
There's Credence.
No, that's
Creedence Clearwater Revival did Midnight Hour. There's a bunch of people.
That's like a prayer. Yeah.
Yeah. Madonna,
which I also really respond to. By the way,
yes.
If you want
it's funny. My son actually suggested that song when I said the Midnight Hour, and he started singing that same thing too. So
yeah.
Getting back to our guest.
Yes.
For a proper introduction, we are blessed to be with Josh Silverbauer. As you all heard the song, Josh is a man of many talents involving both his left brain and his right brain. He's the singing and dancing analytics guy, the head of analytics and CRO at From the Future. He's an avid user and proponent of Microsoft Clarity, which we'll be talking about, as well as Piwik Pro. He's spoken at South by Southwest, Measure Summit, Marketing Analytics Summit, and more. And now we get into the fun stuff. He's created the internationally acclaimed Analytics Rock Opera, Volumes 1 and 2, which we'll dive into.
Literally internationally acclaimed.
Internationally, yes. People across the world have acclaimed it.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was in the Josh and Pete band, which I'm sure everyone has heard of. He has produced, written, and directed musicals with his wife. He teaches song parody writing classes, which I was lucky enough to be involved in at Measure Camp Chicago, which is how I gained the skills to produce the previous song.
Incredible.
He's also an Elvis impersonator, or was an Elvis impersonator, and lo and behold, he helped us with our podcast theme song, our intro song.
Right.
Yes, that is the big claim to fame. Actually, you've been hearing him for years at this point. And so we love that intro. Can I just dig into that Elvis impersonator piece though? Elvis is in the building, yes, or
that is true.
Elvis has left the building, or
Elvis has left the building for now. I mean, during my 20s, when I didn't know what I wanted to do in life, I worked at
Elvis impersonator. That's
coffee shops, Gorilla Grams, and Elvis Grams, baby. You know?
Oh my God!
So
what would that like? You would just sing like you'd be like, "Oh, thank you very much."
I would go into I would go into different like surprise people at work or at parties dressed as either a gorilla or Elvis, and they'd pay me like $60 and maybe I'd get a tip of like $10, and oftentimes it was really unaccepted. Like they didn't want me there. So it was definitely
pay me more to go away quicker. Is that the
they're like, you can leave now.
Okay. Oh my God.
You know, but
jokes
on them, because I can see their website visits now. So, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Steve from Milwaukee.
Yes.
But no, yeah, we're talking behavioral analytics today. It is, I mean, it's a topic that Jim, you're saying doesn't get much. I think it does get some love. I think there's just this, I don't know, there's a scalability challenge with it. There's some that's interesting. I don't know how useful it is. Sort of issues perhaps that are swirling around this. So, Josh, could you just maybe even just what is encompassed by the world of behavioral analytics?
Yeah. So generally, behavioral analytics falls into two main categories, or has up to this point, right? There's been heat maps where like people are clicking, where they're scrolling on the website, information about like where people are having issues on a specific page, or where they're clicking on a specific page. There's also how far down people are scrolling. So if your form's at the bottom of the page and no one's getting there, then maybe you want to move your form up, right? So there's the heat map element of showing a live version of your website with data that's on it based off of interactions. And then 2, session recordings, which is where you get into the watching people, which traditionally, unless you're going to, unless you have like a really, really, really big sale and you want to understand that, full journey of that person on your website, like the value of a single session is probably not super duper valuable. But, one thing that I like about Clarity is it's heading in a direction where it can take that information, leveraging AI, right, and take a bunch of different session recordings and find trends on, multiple different types of criteria. So you can filter down by, people who added to cart but didn't purchase, and then see a bunch of session recordings and get AI to, tell you a little bit more about those types of users. So, it's heading in a scalable direction, and I have some thoughts of where it's going to keep going and keep going. But yeah, definitely, it's turning more into a hot topic because of its scale, because they're turning around the scalability aspect of it.
Okay, interesting. So I'm sure, like most, like Clarity. How long's Clarity been around?
Only 3 years.
Really?
This is this year they celebrated their 3rd birthday.
No way.
I remember when it first came out, it was a
pretty
little
bad.
bit controversial, right? Because it was if you put you'll know the specifics, but there was some piece of Microsoft code. If you put it in your site, Clarity was like automatically included.
Yep.
It didn't like
the UET tag. The
Yes,
UET
yes, yes.
tag. If you put that on your site, traditionally it would automatically load Clarity in, and now that's an option that you don't have to do, right? So it definitely, like, in the beginning it was controversial. It was also kind of heavy in terms of, like, clunky in terms of, like, the amount of site speed that it affected, right? It was just like a clunkier system, and they've put a lot of resources into speeding up the performance and making it more transparent on what's actually happening, and give you options to turn cookies on or off, and, like, give you more of that kind of, like, control over the data that it receives and what it's sending.
I feel like we should have, like, an acronym bell. Anytime we use an acronym, it should be like ding ding ding. Like, so that is the universal event tag. I'm sure.
Yes.
A lot of folks listening to this will probably be generally aware, but when that came about, I was like, this is a lot better than a lot of other solutions I've seen in terms of how those events, especially reporting into Bing Ads at the time. This is so interesting. You both mentioned Clarity. I know we've sort of, we've bounced around what are the like, the 30-second elevator pitch on Clarity of, like, what is it? Why would you get it? Why would you use it?
So, I mean, there have been behavioral analytics tools, in the past that, probably the most famous one is Hotjar, and Hotjar is great, and that was, like, the predominant, heat map software for a lot of years. And
I was a crazy egg guy myself, but
crazy egg, and then there's ones that support, like, CRO tools, like VWO had one, right? Smart Look was another one. Like, these things have existed for a really long time. What's really interesting is Clarity took kind of Google's business model around Google Analytics and was like, we're going to create this completely free. And that, mixed with the team, which I really, really like but it's kind of like, it feels like this startup in the midst of, like, this major corporation. So they have, like, the funding and the resources of Microsoft, but, like, the attitude of, like, a startup. And so just from my interactions on it, they respond to what users are requesting. They are constantly innovating. They're building more and more and more onto the tool. And, like, if somebody has an issue, they can bring it directly to the Clarity team. And I've seen the Clarity team kind of, I product advise there. They bring it up and they say, do you feel this is valuable? Do you think this is a one user type of situation? Or is this, like, is this a feature that we should build? So it's been, the experience there has been really cool. But yeah, 30-second pitch it's a lightweight, very simple tool to see behavioral analytics for free. And that's why it's gaining, a lot of popularity, where the world of GA4 is this, like, we're going more and more and more complicated. Clarity is very much the opposite, which is, how can we simplify this as much as possible?
Yeah. And in terms of, like, when you talk about what people use Clarity for versus what you would use GA4 or Piwik Pro or Adobe Analytics for, like, where do you draw the line there? Because there's a little bit of overlap, but it seems pretty clear delineation between what the tools are for, right?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Jim. I actually just did a presentation on the differences between marketing analytics tools and behavioral analytics tools. So this is top of mind. I like to think that a marketing analytics tool is very much about the final key action that you want people to say. See there that I didn't say key event, key action that we want people to take, and how that relates back to your content and also your campaigns, right? Your marketing campaigns, like the attribution element of that user who did that action. Whereas behavioral analytics is more about the user flow and the user interactions on either a single page or throughout the website, right? So what you're trying to achieve with a behavioral analytics tool is to reduce friction for that user, right? To understand where people are having hiccups, or they're, really angry because they're expecting something a certain way, and optimize the website itself without really concentrating too much on that final action that you want them to take. You can, there's the ability to do that, but it's really more hyper focused on the overall experience for that user on your website.
One way I think about this is like the marketing analytics tools like the GA4s and Peak Present or whatever. They answer the what, but the clarities answer the why and the how, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the why not.
And how come,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
how come they didn't get to this step, right? Like, what is happening on my website? What is the page that is causing friction? And on that page, can I find anything there that might be an idea to then bring that to a CRO tool or something, right? To then test a follow-up hypothesis. So I use it a lot for hypothesis generation and to test different, ideas on a page.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was just thinking, like, it seems like this is more of a tool not for like the web analyst who's in Google Analytics or whatever, but more for like the CR person. Like they want to look at where people are clicking, where there's not a click, or what problems they're having, and that generates ideas and hypotheses what they could test on, right?
Yeah, and there's definitely like a little overlap, right? Like, the reason that you would want to optimize is so that they do get to that final key action, right? So there is, some overlap in terms of, trying to optimize the system for that key action, and that's what you're there looking to do. But, in like a tool like Google Analytics, it's showing you the landing page and how the landing page performed with your key action. It's not really going into the why or how come, right? Why is this not performing very well? Why is this, landing page, causing people issues? And that's where you would switch over to a behavior analytics tool and trying to find those answers, right? And so you can use them in conjunction. You could pass data between them, which is really interesting to do. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of how they work together.
Let's say more on that, because I recall years ago it's only 3 years old. It's still I'm like, this thing just seems like it's been around longer than that. Certainly in terms of market presence, but I believe there was an integration between Google Analytics and Clarity that would allow, if I'm not mistaken, for the client ID or perhaps the session ID to be integrated. And that was an area that I'd seen used by analytics engineers for debugging purposes when you just couldn't absorb. Like, how does that work? What is that intersection? What's that piece?
Well, so they got rid of that when GA4,
oh, really?
Yeah. So like
brilliant.
Everyone was complaining about cardinality because it would send a unique ID every single time. That was a unique session ID into GA4. So like the better kind of integration and like, where if you wanted to, for instance, leverage your Google Analytics client ID or your user ID and pass that down to Clarity, you can then drill down from your Google Analytics data into your, Clarity data, right? So like it's unfortunate. And if you're using Pivot Pro, this is a non-issue, right? Like you can send whatever you want into the different systems, but because of the cardinality issue, you don't really want a whole ton of unique values in your GA4. It's kind of just like,
there's that what is it? Killed by Google guy on Twitter who's just like, all these products that Google killed. I feel like there should be a killed by Google Analytics bottom. Just like, what did Google Analytics destroy? That
pretty soon, Google Analytics, I would say.
Yeah, itself. Yeah,
they already did that.
The final chapter.
They already killed Google Analytics.
Yeah. Oh God, I mean, they did, at least in our hearts, I think.
Yeah.
So no, but that is a very interesting scenario that it's really unfortunate they took it away. So okay, that I think still speaks to this sort of core issue of, you're doing this observation, you talk about it for hypothesis testing, but what I'm always really fearful or mindful of being overly influenced by the anecdote of one.
Yeah.
And I think there's a very real scalability issue here, or extensibility issue, and that is, are you not over-engineering toward a granular grain that may just be anomalous in nature, and it's not necessarily representative of what you should be looking at? How are you thinking about that within this environment?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right in that, the session recording functionality, like a single session, basically the things that I find that useful for is if somebody's having a really bad experience, like like if you like, because Clarity, sends JavaScript errors, to clarity, right? And different kind of, code errors. You can fine tune, a single session of somebody who is experiencing an actual issue and see like what happened there,
Yeah.
right? Which could be valuable in terms of like debugging your product, right? And debugging your website. Where I think there's definitely more value is where clarity is heading, where you can leverage Copilot chat, or not chat, just the Copilot summaries, which exists in both the heat map and also the session recordings, to select 100 sessions. It's based off the amount of time that the session is occurring, right? So you could say like they'll give you like 600 minutes or something like that. And so if they're all short sessions, like you get 100 in there, but if they're long, then you might be able to get 5, right?
Sure.
And you can, and this is definitely I would say in beta, right? In a way, because it doesn't allow you to select all, right? So you have to go one by one and select the criteria. And also you have to, you're not sure how many you're allowed to have. There's just no system there. But what it outputs is a trend analysis about those users. So if you filter down to a specific user type, so people on mobile who were on the cart page who exited, it would give you trends about those users as a whole, right? And so that can be a lot better if you're selecting, a bunch of different users to understand trends and to allow you to find some actual value out of that tool.
Okay. I mean, I guess where I struggle a little bit is, back in the crazy egg days, I would pull up those heat maps and I would look at them, and the top of it would always be red.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, people have landed. That's the contentful pane that was loaded when they landed. And some of them bounced, some of them scrolled down. And so it was just red, slowly turns to green at the bottom. And I'm like, this is a great example of just a regression to the average that we're now observing of most people don't do anything. Does it mitigate that? Is there like a classification component of this, of like, cutting out the bottom? I don't know. How do you think about that piece?
I mean, it's going to select, so you can filter whatever criteria you want, right? So like if you want to only see users who did certain actions on your website, right? There's this tool called Smart Events, and you can like drill down into like only people who purchased or only people who added to cart, right? So you can get a subset and a segment of those users and like filter down the heat map based off of that, which could, kind of help you with understanding, a better representation of like the traffic that is valuable to you. But in terms of like the other part of your question, really what I use like heat maps, the scroll heat maps the most for is I combine it with, some kind of marketing analytics tool where I try to understand a feature on a site. So for instance, if like, we're on an e-commerce site and the you may also like is at the very bottom, right? And we try to understand like conversion rate based off of people who interact with that, right? And then I see in my heat map that 7% of the customers actually get there, right? And so now I can say, okay, here's an experiment. What happens if we move that up where 15%? What does that conversion rate look like? Is it steady? Right? Is that really driving it, or is it kind of, fall off? So there's an experiment that I would possibly get from a heat map.
Although, I guess just to play devil's advocate, is it not possible to achieve that by loading an event on like a div visibility element and using that as your denominator? I'm just purely thinking through the lens of
I mean, it's
different
really
devices, different everything. Like, yeah,
sure. I mean, like you can do a lot of what you're doing in Clarity in GA4 if you really want to like kind of send those events there. I think the benefit is that you're seeing it, you're visualizing it, right? When you have a GA4 dashboard, it's like just a bunch of charts and graphs and dashboard and junk, I mean, no offense to you dashboard people out there, but
shout out to the dashboard folks.
Leave a comment if you disagree.
They're actually our biggest listener group. It's a whole
thing, never invited back. So I mean, like, you can achieve the same thing, and honestly, like sometimes I do push all that data as a support system into GA4 and build funnel reports based off of that type of stuff, but for the lay person and the person who is not as technical and the person who wants to understand where people are going on their site, and what they think they might be seeing versus what they're actually seeing, it can be pretty valuable.
Mm.
Yeah, so you mentioned, you touched a little bit about like the AI side of things with Copilot and how it's sort of leading in a certain direction, and in my mind, it's kind of opening up a lot more possibility with these types of tools, right? Because
Yeah.
like we talked about, like no one has time to sit through and watch 1,000 different screen recordings of 1,000 different sessions. But if you can like narrow down on the important sessions based on add to carts or something like that, and then get a summary of like, here's what we see, here are the trends that are happening, that gives you something to kind of go on from there. What are the other things in the roadmap, whether things that you know of or and can talk about, or things that would be, let's say, on your wish list for a tool like Clarity for the next year?
Yeah. So I can't talk about what's actually occurring, but I can talk about like what I would like to see. And so right now this year they released chat, which allows you to kind of chat with the data, which can be helpful in terms of getting to a quick, answer on, where people are falling off and what devices are the most problematic. I think in the future of this tool, it is going to be able to send, based off of the landing page information that it's learning, it's going to be able to auto send data to ads in like Bing and Google Ads, and automatically optimize messaging based off of how it interprets the data on the landing page. Right. I think there's going to be a lot more data exchange between the ad platform, between the behavior analytics tool and the ad platform tool. Right. And then two, I think that there's going to be a lot more of kind of this behavior analytics to automatic optimization or personalization, right? So like based off of like the data that it has learned to automatically personalize the website experience based off of what has previously happened, right? So using predictive analytics to basically personalize based off of the behavior data that it has already.
And would that be at the personal level, like each individual person, you think? Or
I think so.
that's interesting.
I mean, interesting and terrifying simultaneously, right? Because
Yeah. Oh,
there's
totally.
this interesting intersection of just, I don't know, when I think about the way PMAX works, for example, like in the ads world, it's one of those like, yeah, like 10% of experience is going to be terrible. But we have to learn. And I'm just imagining going to a website being like, this is horrendous. Like, who put this together? None of this makes sense. Like, the sentences are fragmented. And they're like, well, we had to know. And I'm like, a human would never have learned that way. Like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it is at like ultra reliance on like AI and like getting like removing that humanistic element, which, from an emotional perspective, an emotional response perspective, like, I don't know if that's going to be an effective way of, converting users. Right. And it may, right. But, I just think there's a lot to, the creative process around campaigns and how, and how websites are ingested, right, from an emotional perspective, and taking that away and hyper personalizing it with whatever product they think the person wants to see in whatever message. I don't know if that's going to be able to kind of be the end all for us.
Well, are we slow walking toward the sort of inevitable heat death of A/B testing at this moment? It seems like it. It would seem rational that like 2 variants is not enough. Like you've got to have a great degree of that.
There's already platforms that are doing hyper personalization of like nav bar, of like what people see in the nav bar, what products they see at any given moment, and they're testing that hyper personalization up against non hyper personalization at all. So it's that A/B test, but it's a significant amount of like variations on this side versus just A and B, right? And so it's kind of like the tool basically is set to show you how does hyper personalization work as a whole versus your other, versus your non version of that.
I'm going to say an unpopular thing here.
Hot take alert.
This is half-baked thoughts, but
all right,
I'm not fully sold on the whole personalization.
All right, I'm back. All right, I kicked my headphone out.
Oh no, yeah. So hot take. I'm not sold on personalization, like the ultra hyper one-to-one personalization. I don't think that I mean, it's easy to tell a story, a narrative about how, of course, if the website is personalized to you and it shows you what you want to see, and clearly you'll be, more likely to convert. I haven't seen that bear out, and I've
I
seen a lot
mean,
of people make the claim without actually properly testing it, just going under the assumption that, of course, personalization is better. Um,
I would
yeah.
argue that we are seeing it, because I would argue that like brands like Amazon, brands like streaming services are already doing that type of hyper personalization of, you like this content, so you're probably going to want to do this content next, right? Or you like this product, you will do. And so like it's not necessarily the messaging, but it's the content itself that it's showing you,
Mm.
right? Versus like the the messaging and the emotional response like element of it. And so and that has proven to be successful, right? If you're serving something that somebody previously had and adjacent items, they are probably going to be more likely to buy, right? And so, I do see that happening now, but it's this idea of like everything being hyper personal, like like the messaging, the imagery, the funnel, like everything like matching that user, that it's like it's hard to conceive that. I don't know, right? It's like will we go that way?
Right, and then you have to have the whole team responsible for all of the new creative, all of the new text, all of the new content, all of the new copywriting, all like, there's that piece of it too. But yeah, like I
Well,
think
AI would do that.
certain
Yeah,
Uh,
certain
AI would
use
do that.
cases.
AI like ChatGPT would do that, right? They would
That's
come up with the
right.
imagery. They would come up with the yeah, right.
Yeah,
They would show you the perfect model that
yeah.
they think you like, wearing the clothes that you want to buy, right? And it's hyper personalizing that experience to you based off of what your interactions based off of the rest of the site, right? And so yeah, it
so,
would be interesting.
so like two thoughts are colliding in my brain right now, which is sort of that idea of hyper personalization, right, which collides with the idea of user privacy and all of the uh, regulations that are in play and coming down the pipe. And I wonder, like, personalization sounds great, but what if every time I come to your website, it doesn't know who I am anymore, right? So there's,
I think I
yeah,
think the idea of it would be it does, right, because it would be storing first party data around like the way that Chat GPT works, where when you go back to your account, right, it knows what you like. It can write a picture and write a sentence about who you are, right, if you ask it to.
right,
And I
but that's
think
because that's because I'm logged in, right?
that's
So
because you are
and,
logged in
and
and
Yeah.
you
I've
have
kept it,
accepted.
I let it keep that memory, right?
Yes.
But are we not just fundamentally talking about the utility of a first party cookie here, in that if I go to a website,
Right.
add something to my cat, and then I leave and I come back and it's still on my cat, technically it is personalized to me and it's remembered who I am because it still has maintained the product I put in the cat. Now that's
Right.
the most basic sample of this, but I'm looking at this moment going, there is something interesting here about being able to stitch that together with if I click on a picture of a man or if I click on a picture of a woman, the degree to which that is able to persist. Although, I mean, even that cat example doesn't go cross device, or like, I guess I hear your point, Jim. There's still a major chasm associated with identity resolution in this environment, and if I'm not mistaken, one of the big things Clarity puts out there is it's GDPR compliant. Is that still a truism? Is that, or sort of,
It
is it
can
that the Adobe evil headline that's gone now?
it can be. It gives
Okay,
you
it can be.
yes.
Everything can be. Yeah.
It gives
Uh,
you the ability to opt out of cookies, or opt to not put a first party cookie on the website or identifier on the website, so that it's all just random IDs per page.
So you
Right.
you could watch the playback of a specific page, but it wouldn't be able to play that user's
Correct.
session across all pages. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So that mixed with its ability to integrate with like a cookie banner is basically GDPR.
Interesting. Well, I mean, and I think we're also sort of advancing into the future of the web to a degree here. Right now, of course, one of the big headlines is potentially the DOJ is looking to have Google divest from Chrome. And so I'm thinking a lot more about the open web in terms of identity persistence. And, there's always this idea of like universal logged in states. And there is an interesting idea here where maybe Microsoft were to say, look, we want you to have a persistent login across these environments, and that will enable a better experience for you. And look, there's a lot of websites that I go to where I'm like, I have no interest in buying women's clothing, and they sell a lot of, and I'm like, I just want men's clothing. Like if I want women's clothing, if it's a toggle I can toggle on to buy a gift something, that's fine. But like, I really just have interest in buying stuff for myself, and so it's just like clothing because I don't know. it's a hard thing to gift. Is clothing. It's like I guessed your size. Like you guessed as a 4XL. I'm like I did. I'm sorry, but but no, it's one of those things that I'm like maybe that is a possibility. And gosh, I don't know. My mind is just churning with how many scenarios are here. But it is at the end of the day this privacy issue still. Of how deep do you go? And
and you can think of all the ways it can go wrong, which could potentially
big
be.
time.
So I have to share this completely
how?
inappropriate story that just happened
Oh.
last week. So I get an email. I subscribe to the New York Times. Like I get the daily, I forget what they call it. It's like the daily email in the morning.
Sure.
It's like, here's the headlines and the topic. And I get like other emails related to like New York Times stuff. I'm on whatever list they have me on. I get an email last week and it was like top 10 gift buying ideas for 2025 Christmas, whatever. And I open it up and like the first thing is like this women's skin cream. I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. Okay. And the second thing was like some sort of a scarf or something. I'm like, huh?
These are gifting ideas,
the
not
third thing.
Shemite.
The third thing I kid you not was a vibrator.
Oh gosh.
I'm not even joking. New York Times. I'm like,
wow.
So am I being punked? What is going on here? And it was like I scrolled through the rest of the list. It was like clearly all like women related items, but not the kind of thing that you would buy for the woman in your life.
Well,
how do they not know?
Judge.
I mean, anyway.
I mean that's a I think that they probably did not intend to do that.
I'm imagining it was like some wire got crossed. I got on the wrong list, or they sent it to the wrong. Yeah.
Although, I mean, it's interesting that is like there are now ads on like Meta for vibrators that I see. That I mean, this has always been one of those.
I was looking for
I
was looking for a carburetor. Come on, guys.
Yes.
Well, no, I actually was looking for a back massager, and it was just vibrators. So it's one of those interesting things. You like,
I mean, you can use it for that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, no, it was one of those like pneumatic ones that looks like a gun that you like.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
And then other vibrators. So anyway,
right, so that segue to switch gears into
how do I? Oh God!
You start with Microsoft Clarity. You always go into vibrators. It's just like it's the pathway that every single call. Remember
that AI? There was that AI bot recently that they basically I think they gave it like $10,000 and they said turn this into $1 million, and it was taking its investment advice from Reddit, and then it had a human that was executing it. One of the things that came up during that was that it kept, saying, I want to buy this, I want to buy this. Eventually, it got to the point of saying, I want to buy some porn. And you're like, what are you going to do with that? What is the value of that to an AI bot? Like, and it's because it was being fed by Twitter and
and by Reddit, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
Twitter and Reddit, and you're just like, of course, that's the regression tweet.
Number one, baby, number one.
Yeah. I'm like, but what are you gonna do to monetize it? Are you gonna start a website? Like, this is the whole.
We're off the rails on this one.
That's the hyper-personalization. But isn't it one of the fears of personalization though? Is if you regress to a point. This is what folks say. You regress to a point of primal urge or primal desire when you go down a path of hyper-personalization, which maybe is not a good thing for the internet. And I think we see it on Meta with some of the ways that like their content, certainly like the thumb-stopping content, is like these pictures that are you're like, I can't believe that's an ad. That's too salacious.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like, it's a type of thing where it's like if I'm looking like up health stuff or like, I'm a hypochondriac, so I'm constantly looking up what I'm dying of. And like, I don't want my wife seeing that on my Facebook page, and so like you keep going down. It's like, oh my God, we've already started, So
I wonder what Steve from Milwaukee's looking up though. We could probably find that out in Clarity.
Oh yes, Steve from Milwaukee is looking at that vibrator.
He is. But that is so. I think one of the interesting things though here is screen recording. Broadly speaking, is kind of creepy.
Yeah.
How invasive is it? Are we talking like if I put my credit card number in, it's tracking that? Like, is it like intelligent obfuscation that's occurring?
There are fields that it automatically blocks, so it wouldn't be able to see that you are your actual numbers, but it would be able to see that you're entering the fields.
Sure.
Right. I think it's the it's the first party cookie, third party cookie. I mean, I wrote a song about it last, on my last album. It's like that Jim actually introduced, and it's basically the equivalent of you going to a party and the host not wanting to let you leave because he wants to have you experience the best possible experience there. But that's creepy, right? You should, like, your free will should be there to leave, right? So it's, I think there's definitely benefits in terms of like website optimization, but at the same time, like this comes down to ethics and like how you're using the data and like what you're using it for. Yeah, technically you can add your own user ID, that you have in your system into Clarity and watch their entire session, right? Like, would I do that? Probably not, right? Unless it's Steve from Milwaukee. But other than that, I would not, and Steve's getting a hard rap today.
He is.
But yeah,
imagine if there's a guy called Steve from Milwaukee listening to this episode, just being like, I am getting personally targeted right now.
Steve, if you are listening, go ahead and send us an email. Get in touch.
We have a
dashboard guy.
Yeah, he's a dashboard guy, and we're going to send you a printful shirt as a consolation prize.
Yeah, don't worry, we already know your address. But you mentioned your last album. Let's talk about that, because you gosh, there are many people that I would call Mr. or Mrs. Community in the analytics world. I think we're very fortunate to have a lot of people who are just good-natured individuals who want the analytics people to be together and to have good, hard conversations. But you've taken it to the next level. You and Jason Packer have done some really interesting things. Tell us about your album, all of it. Jim, you know a lot more about it. What's the origin? How did this all happen?
Yeah. What's the origin story of the first volume 1, Universal Sunset. So it's the user journey is the rock opera. User journey volume 1 is Universal Sunset. So maybe what started that?
And by the way, it's on Spotify. So if
it's on Spotify, Apple Music.
Pause the episode, go listen to it, and come back in like an hour, and then this will all make sense.
I think I owned my own agency for 7 years before I ended up leaving that. And when I had my son, I left that agency. And during that, I was not part of the community at all. I did analytics, but I didn't even know that there was a community that existed, right? I really didn't. I was just so far out of it. I knew that Simo Ahava existed. I knew some other people, because I would learn from them, and like Julian and Julius, like I knew that like that's who I learned from, but I didn't realize that there was this like robust community, right? And so I started to just, think about ways that I could contribute in a way that is like, we have all these like super duper brilliant people who definitely know more about analytics than me, but not as many of them could potentially write a rock opera about the field, right? And so I wanted to stand out. And so the first thing that I did was the Universal Sunset song. And that was because that was something that was happening in my life. And I was like, I really want to just like put out this thing that I have to live through and talk a little bit about the anxiety of what's next. So I like just tailored the song to that. And I got a good response from that song. And I was like, you know what, let me just make this into something bigger. And so I reached out to, originally I reached out to, I wanted to make it like each platform has a song, right? And so I reached out to Jason Packer, who I didn't know, because he wrote the GA4 alternatives book. And so I was like, hey, you seem to know a lot about these platforms. I don't. Which ones should I make songs about? And he was like, can I be on this album? I play guitar. And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And I honestly had no idea if Jason was good or not. And it freaked me out in the beginning, right? I was like, I just said yes to this person who knows a lot more people than me. So it's like good from a community perspective, but I don't know if this is going to be quality. And he turned out to be amazing. And not only did he contribute guitar, but he also contributed all the narration, like all the written words that happen between songs. And so it morphed from this kind of like platform related song into a hero journey, which is user journey, right? Mm-hmm. About an alien who has to figure out what's next. And that alien's Cookie. And he's like us, right? He's like, we all had universal analytics. We all like got used to the system. And like, now we have to figure out where the hell to go from there, right? And so the first album is all about trying to find a way off of his universe to get to a new universe, right? And that's, where he meets those characters for First Party Cookie, like the dinosaurs and all that stuff, right? And so that naturally then, picks up where he left off for the second album. And it's going to be a 3-volume trilogy where now on this album, Cookie is now exploring different universes to determine which one he wants to live in next and whether, he should pick one. And basically gets manipulated and starts doing some pretty bad things. And so we end on that.
I think we should hear an excerpt from User Journey Volume 2, The Custom Dimension. I'm going to click play. Everyone listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube is going to hear it. the two of you are going to just pretend that you're hearing it right now.
Yes.
And this clip is track number 4, The Professor's Warning. It's nice short, 47 seconds. And it features our very own Simon Polton and friend of the pod, Siobhan Solberg. So let's hear
Yes.
this for 47 seconds.
Annoyed and frustrated, Cookie smashed a rock against one of the great clock faces. It wasn't like Cookie to be violent, but he just couldn't help himself. From behind the shattered clock, a small wingless bird hopped out and raised its long beak to address Cookie. With a clear and melodious voice, the fluffy kiwi bird introduced himself and said,
I'm sorry, but I'm afraid you mustn't smash, nor slice, nor drill, nor dice. The guide is, of course, quite clear.
The bird's name was Professor Pirwiki, and he was a friend of the great tag magician. Not just a friend, but the wizard's familiar, and a way for him to continue to help and advise Cookie. The diminutive professor leapt up to Cookie's shoulder and began to teach him the rules. Dimensional travel was confusing, and without rules, he said, it could be dangerous.
So Josh, are there are there any other creative projects that you're working on now, or is it like back onto volume 3 now?
So no, I take a break between Thanksgiving and New Year's. This is on the same schedule as I had last year. So like finish it around Thanksgiving, and then back in January I start working on the next one, and the next one is going to be done. I'm done with it. It's going to be a Star Wars trilogy type scenario. But
so in like 10 years, then you'll be back for another trilogy, and then you will diversify into like 5 different types of albums that everyone will be like, why did you make this? Stop ruining my childhood.
Exactly. Yeah. But the only person who I'll ruin's childhood is my son, who really likes this album. So
no, you'll go back and you'll recut the original album, and you'll replace any reference to Google Analytics with something ridiculous. They'll be like, what? Why would you do that? And you're like, it's the way I intended it originally. I didn't have the words.
Yeah. So in terms of like what I do now to then, I have Experimentation Island, which Kelly Wortham and Ton Westling brought me on board to write parody songs for all of the speakers, which there are so many. So that's a lot of work. But I'm getting through them like basically every 2 weeks, and I think I'll hit my target of all. It's just a lot of work. And they keep, and I promised myself, what did you say?
That's at the end of February, right?
That's at the end of February. Experimentation Island. Definitely come, because it'd be super fun. And
we'll put some links in the notes there.
I've never been to a CRO conference. I've only been to analytics conference. So this is very exciting.
Can I ask really quick? There is, and I did not think this was debate until recently. There seems to be debate about the word CRO, in that some folks pronounce it crow. What's up with that? Who calls it crow?
I don't call it crow.
If you have a team that does CRO, is it a murder?
Oh, yes. Yes. No, that's actually just when you put.
I think we should murder the word. Murder the word. So anyway, I don't know who says crow, but regardless, if it rhymes,
Chrometrics do. Apparently that's what they call themselves. They call themselves Chrometrics. I'm like, none of this makes sense.
Well, now that you told me that, I'm going to potentially use it as a rhyme when I hear an O. So I think that's helpful to be in my roster. But
one time I was at a meta conference, F8, the meta conference I used to have, and there was one of the engineers was on stage, and she was talking about earls, and I'm like, what is an earl? And I'm sitting there for like 10 minutes just trying to figure this out. And I'm like,
in real life.
URL. It's a URL.
Duke of URLs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my
man.
God.
So
it's absurd.
So that's what's going on, and then I have a
URL of sandwich. Anyway,
and then I got my yearly Christmas song coming up too. So it's always something that I try to do at the end of the year.
When is that coming out? Because I think this episode's going to release before Christmas. So we'll I mean, if we can put that in the notes. But what do you have? Does it come out on Christmas Day? Are you like
no? Because then no one would listen to it.
Right.
So I'll probably put it maybe 1 or 2 weeks before Christmas.
Okay.
So that you can add it to your mix and put it in there. And I have last year's song too that you can add to your mix and put it in there. So make me some money off of Spotify, like 3/4 cent. So,
hey, don't spend it all in one place. I love this, by the way. I think this is like the nerdiest thing, and I say that from a place of I'm a nerd. I think this is the nerdiest thing I've ever seen. But it is a combinatorial love of music and analytics, which is I don't know. There's a love or an affinity that would lead you to create one song. there is an obsession with being a giant nerd that leads you to create a 3-album trilogy with multiple, like 12-part songs of it. What I love about it more than anything is the degree to which you look at this as a community integration tool, because it's not just that you have folks from the community come and be part of these songs, but you also, at Measure Camp, this is what Jim was talking about earlier, you taught Measure Camp, the topic can be anything you want. I don't think it was ever intended that anyone would be like, I'm going to do a class on parody songwriting. How did that come to your mind? Like, I'm going to do this and this. How did that go?
I mean, again, like I thought that many topics were already going to be covered.
Sure.
Right. And if I do an analytics topic, I'm going to be up against, some really, really smart people. And I did a clarity one, but I think, where I can stand out is, I've taught this class many times, this parody songwriting class, and I, just have it up here. And I was like, you know what, I'll do that. And I just wanted to flex the brains. I wanted to know that everybody lives in this math world has this creative side of their brain too. And it was awesome. People came up with amazing songs. And if I do it again, I would probably take some of those songs and record them for people, because I think it would be so fun.
Jim, what did you come up with? You were in the class.
It was well attended. Yeah. I still have my notebook, and it was to the song "Let It Be" by the Beatles. And let's see, where is it at? I find it.
And while he's doing it, it was like, pick anything about data and write about that song, like to this parody, basically.
Yeah.
So like to tie it into data.
Yes,
I still think
Let
you
It
should have
Be.
done a parody to Bob, but anyway.
Well, I should have. No, I chose "Let It Be," and instead of "Let It Be," it was "Measure Me." So when I'm in your site to buy a widget, looking for a price for 3, I add it to my cart, "Measure Me." And that was all I got. I didn't finish it. So
Measure Me, measure me.
yeah. But
wonderful.
So
inspirational.
Josh, I know we like to round out these sessions, these recordings, with an incremental insight, something that our guests can find valuable, take action on right now. Maybe it's a book or a podcast or a video or something where they can go and like get some value out of. Do you have a tip, a trick, an article, a link, something that you'd like to share?
I mean, besides all the stuff that we talked about, which I hope you do go to and do explore with all the music stuff, I would say like where I am like living right now. So do you want it to be data related or not data related?
Oh, it could be anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am part of I am a board member of an organization in Philadelphia called Rock to the Future, which basically teaches kids music for free in underdeveloped areas, with under-resourced areas. And I believe so deeply in the power of music. I would love for everybody here to just check them out. There's this kid named Jose who is up in their Instagram right now, the first thing there. He went from 9th grade to 12th grade, not knowing any piano, and now he's a maestro, basically. Like, these are kids who, if you give them access to music, they thrive. So I definitely go there, check it out, Rock to the Future, and I would love for you to be there.
I love that. And I've found so many folks in the space who are musicians. And to me, a musician is anyone who has any interest even in playing an instrument. You don't have to be good. You just have to enjoy the act of it. Oddly, that is how I trace my story into digital marketing analytics, is through making music. Then I made a website, and then I think it is such a functionally wonderful creative outlet, especially for you. So I love that you're doing that. That's just so incredibly cool to see. Usually I end up some kind of quippy note about measuring up. I don't, Jim, do you have a quippy note to conclude today on?
No, I don't.
Well, if your name is Steve from Milwaukee and you're listening to this podcast, perhaps it's time to invest in some privacy solutions for your life and freeze your credit score while you measure up.
Yeah, is Milwaukee up? Is Milwaukee
it's up from me. I'm in Southern California, so it's up and to the right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're measuring up to you.
That's right. Absolutely. All the Canadians up there, all of you as well.
Yes.
That's about it.